talks to medical professionals. It's a little bit different. Good morning, Jay. Good morning, guys. It's a little bit different because when you're appealing to the scientific mind, okay, and you have to keep into consideration, all right, that education is controlled, okay, at a certain level. And curriculum in education is very much organized, okay? So, some people refer to it as indoctrination, and that's exactly what it is, because you're being indoctrinated into a system of things. But if you look at it from the spiritual and physical aspect of it, okay, and the human being level and what and who we truly are, okay, as spiritual beings, okay, then it kind of defies the system, because the system is not based on spirituality. The system is not based upon you being a spirit, okay? I'm here to tell you that you're not your body, you're not your name, you're that spirit that lives in here, that energy that lives in here, okay? So today we're going to address it on the scientific level, and we're going to kind of contrast it here and there, okay? But this is how I present to medical professionals. Now, I deal with a lot of them, a lot of nurses, okay? Nurses are not so bad, okay? But I deal with physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, okay? So these people, in fact, I have, right now I have a neuroscientist, okay? And when I explain things to a neuroscientist, right, he already understands the fundamentals, okay? But he does not understand the power within him, okay? This is because the focus becomes the curriculum. This is because the knowledge becomes his God, so to speak, okay? All right, so we've talked before about not letting money become your God, okay? So it's the same with knowledge. It's a system. It's the monetary system. It's the educational system, okay? So here's how we present this more for medical or scientific professionals, okay? So voice production activates the vagus nerve. When you produce sounds through your voice, okay, what is the vagus nerve? Okay, you have the 12 cranial nerves, okay? It's one of your 12 cranial nerves, but it's the longest. It runs down, okay, through the throat chakra, or we say the larynx, and into the vocal folds, through the vocal folds, and into the heart, and then it kind of spreads out, okay? It goes into your gut, it goes into the lower part of your abdomen, okay? But it's the longest cranial nerve. Now, what happens when this cranial nerve gets stimulated? All kinds of good stuff, okay? Okay, so a lot of people, especially professionals, okay, are very, let's say, focused, okay? Let's say tense, okay? Let's say in need of relaxation, okay? Let's say structured, all of these things, okay? Now, for the average person, we call it stress, okay? For those people, we call it stress as well, but it's a different kind of stress. It's a different kind of focus. It's a different kind of problem or complication, okay? So I made notes because I'm going to go over these. Vocalization stimulates the branches of the vagus nerve. So this is one branch. Then down here there are branches because it fans out, okay? And you can look this up and you can check this out, okay? So this stimulation supports the parasympathetic nervous system. Now we've been discussing that. Okay, I've been introducing you to the parasympathetic nervous system. Now this regulates, okay, not only your physiology, not only your body, but your emotions, okay? So when you look online and go, okay, this is somatic healing. Okay, I get it, right? Okay, but when they describe it, it says slow vocal sounds, humming, sustained tones, right, can increase vagal tone. Okay, so the amount of stimulation to the vagus nerve, okay, and the nervous system, okay, but that's not what I do in my practice, or it's not. We'll say in my coaching, we'll say it that way, okay. Now we heal people in the coaching. We only have 5-star reviews, for both of my companies because we use this for people that sing and people that don't sing. And the people that don't sing, we bring them here in Here For You Life Coaching, and the people that sing, they go to another company. It's called Voicemaster Vocal Development. You can look that up, and nothing but 5-star reviews there. Okay, so what is this? And well, we started out right with the voice school a long time ago, and in 2010 we said, well, we're getting these. We did the research from 2007 to 2010, and we found all of this research. And this research was started in the 1940s, but everybody keeps it quiet. Why? Well, because holistic methods are not, they're frowned upon by, let's say, big pharma, let's say, uh, big medicine, so the medical industrial complex. Okay, so this part I don't tell the medical professionals. Okay, they already know. They know. Okay, they're aware. Okay, but we do it with strong vocal tones. Okay, so it's not slow vocal sounds. It's not humming. Okay, that's we would look at that as being trivial. We would look at that as being like it doesn't do much. Okay, good morning. Good morning. Who's joining? User. Good morning, user. Good morning, you guys. Sorry, we have a chat on this side. Okay, but your vocalization. Okay, so when you're speaking, okay, if you speak low enough and strong enough, okay, it stimulates your vagus nerve anyway. Okay, but let's say you're doing it at 60 miles an hour with a lot of vocal pressure, and they're long sustained notes. So as long as you can hold them, you know what it does? It transforms you through your vagus nerve. Okay, what that does is it's like steroids. Okay, it's like that. So it's like healing on steroids. So it happens very rapidly. Okay, in 12 weeks, I totally transform human beings, and this has happened over and over and over and over. Okay, so when they describe it, they say, well, speaking or vocalizing with controlled breathing encourages longer exhalation patterns. That's a fancy way of saying that, yeah, you have to breathe deeply. Okay, so there's two kinds of breathing. Most people do clavicular breathing. Okay, they breathe like this. Okay, when you go to the doctor and they put the stethoscope on you, right? Okay, and they say, take a deep breath. What do? You do this. Okay, it's because when you were small, when you were 2 years old, okay, and you started playing with cousins and friends and, right, maybe siblings, okay, you saw somebody go, and that's what you think a deep breath is. That's not what a deep breath is, okay? So here's what a deep breath is. A deep breath is when you leave your lungs stationary. It's called, okay, so anyway, let's go step by step. When you leave your lungs stationary, because when you do this, okay, clavicular breathing, because your clavicles, your collarbone pop up, okay, they lift. Okay, so what's really happening? You're lifting everything from your ribs on up, or the upper body skeletal system, okay? Right? That's a lot of weight. It doesn't matter how big you are or how tiny you are, you're still lifting a lot of weight for your size, okay? So if you're doing that while you're singing, or if you're doing that while you're breathing, you're working too hard, okay? Intercostal breathing is what you should be doing. Intercostal, so your rib area, rib cage area, your costal region, you have a left and a right. So intercostal, or another way to look at it is breathing from where your lungs are. Okay? In other words, leave them alone, don't stretch them, and go like this. Like that. Okay? So breathing up sounds like this. Okay? Because it's a more shallow breath. Now, people breathe shallow all the time. Okay? If you breathe deeper, okay, as a rule for yourself, okay, you'll get more oxygen. Okay, you'll infuse your cells with more oxygen. You'll be healthier. Okay, you'll have a better mental state. Okay, just by deep breathing alone. Okay, but if you don't lift and you go like this, see how deep that is? I didn't lift. Okay, there, like that. See, And then if I do this, not enough volume in the lungs. But over here, whoa, you see? Okay, when I do that to doctors, okay, but I don't say this when I teach doctors, okay? But when I do that to doctors, they're like, whoa, what was that? Can you do that again? And they've never heard lungs like that. They don't normally hear lungs like that. Okay, when they say, take a deep breath and they put the stethoscope on your back, okay? All right, so, and we're gonna contrast, okay? But I'm going to get into more and show you how I teach scientifically rather than, a lot of spiritual woo-woo, like, mental and spiritual and mental and physical kind of thing and spiritual and physical world, that kind of thing, okay? But there is that, okay? All right, but what happens is in this process of vagus nerve stimulation, it shifts the body away from chronic stress, okay? And it goes towards balanced, okay? Balanced autonomic function. What does that mean? That means when your nervous system calms down, okay? That means it gets you out of the fight or flight that we talked about yesterday, okay? That starts with your amygdala, okay? Okay, you get a negative thought, right? What does the amygdala do? It's trying to keep you, right? It's trying to keep you safe. So it gives you a bunch of negative what ifs about that. Hopefully, hearts warmed. Hey, there you go. Yes, hearts are warmed. Good morning. Good morning. Yayas? Good morning, Yayas. Okay, so what happens is the amygdala starts giving you all these what ifs, all these possibilities, but none of them are positive because the thought is negative. Okay? The amygdala's job is to keep you safe. It's not to like enhance your life, okay? Now you have another thing that works in that same way. It's called the reticular activating system in your brainstem. Okay, now I don't mention any of this to medical professionals because they know. Okay, but the average person, may not know. Okay, some of you may know. And what does the reticular activating system do? It's a filter. Okay, and it's for survival purposes. And what does it do? It filters in what you're focused on. So let's say the amygdala alerts you, and now you're focused on a threat. Now your reticular activating system will bring in everything that's a threat, and it will show you the threats. It will leave out all the positive stuff, things that are not threats. It will leave it out. Why is that? It's so you can run. If there's a tiger in the bushes or a grizzly bear in the bushes, whatever, okay, it wants you to seek it out, identify it, and run from it. No, these things are necessary, okay, if you're living that kind of life. But let's say you're a professional, let's say you're a medical professional, okay? And let's say you're suffering from fight or flight all the time because of the stress, of the worry, okay, of these thoughts that you get that produce all these negative what ifs, okay? And now you start to go in a circle. Why? Because your subconscious starts learning in repetition. And as you start to worry, as you start to be overly concerned, let's say, okay, what happens? Well, it starts to wash, rinse, repeat because your subconscious starts to learn or memorize whatever it is that you keep thinking about. Okay, so if you think that medical professionals don't have worries and thoughts and negative thoughts, and well, okay, they do, and they start to go into fight or flight syndrome. They recognize it for what it is. They know it's happening. They just don't know that this gets you out because they haven't been through it. When I put these people through it, they're like, whoa, right? I have a nurse that's been with me for 4 years. Okay, I rescued her from burnout. Okay, I've rescued a lot of people from burnout, but I'm just saying she's a medical professional. So when I explained it to her, she was like, huh? Okay, because the way I explained it to her, okay, is I explained it to her in the spiritual sense. And when I saw that none of it made connections, okay, I thought, well, she's a Christian, right? She's a Christian. She goes to church every Sunday. Okay. So I thought, well, maybe I should stick with the spiritual side of things so that it enhances what she's in, right? Her religion. But here's the thing, the majority of the people that are inducted into religion, like medical professionals are inducted into their education, very few of them understand their religion for what it is. Okay? At the fundamental level, okay, at the spiritual level, at the connection to the superconscious level. Okay, there's three states of awareness: the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. Okay, so at the conscious level, right, the conscious mind makes a decision, thinks a thought. Okay, when it thinks it over and over again, what happens? It goes into the subconscious as a belief. What does the subconscious do? It forms pathways to achieve whatever the belief is in the subconscious. We call this manifestation. Okay, so it's not magic, it's not witchcraft, it's not any of that. It's subconscious. Okay, now what does the superconscious do? The superconscious represents higher intelligence, infinite intelligence, higher self, source, God, Jesus Christ, Allah, all of these things. And what I'm saying is, all of these entities can be placed here in this category, because this, however you believe, I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but this operates from what's in the subconscious. It accentuates it, it complements it, it allows it avenues. And what happens when that happens? It opens doors, it brings in the right people, okay? And you've had these coincidences happen in your life, right? You set out on a journey and you go, okay, this is the goal, right? Over here, whatever that is, job, okay? And then you start going on your journey. And all of a sudden, because you're focused on this, and because your subconscious goes, oh, okay, I got it, we're working on that, okay. You just happen to meet the right person that works at that company. Thank you. You just happen, Misha, there's Misha, haven't seen you in a while, Misha. You just happen to meet the right person, right? That works at that company. You just happen to meet the right person that, maybe that person, introduces you to someone else at that company who is in HR maybe, and then you fill out an application. Pretty soon you're working at that company. You go, wow, everything just kind of came together. What a coincidence, right? Wrong. Okay? Because the superconscious tells us that we're all connected. How are we all connected? Through awareness. Every human being is the same in here, regardless of what they believe. But everybody has their own belief, okay? And that's fine. There's no problem with that, okay? Now, the voice engages the respiratory system. How does that work? Proper vocal use naturally coordinates breath support. Okay, why is that? Well, it takes breath. Breath is the foundation. When you talk about breath in, let's say, singing, they call it support. Why? Because you need to breathe. Duh. You need to breathe, okay? So breath is the foundation of singing. Why? Because that's what you need. That's the foundation. You only use two things when you sing: muscles and air. Singing is about how much muscles and how much air. And I had to break it down that far for 3-year-olds because they don't understand anything else. But they understand muscles, air, and energy. Okay, and I always tell this story, but there's this, hey, Misha, how you doing? And so I always tell this story because this grandmother said, like my granddaughter is so talented and she sings all day long, and she's 3 years old, and it makes sense, and she's following melody and everything. But when I took her to I talked to these voice schools or whatever, right? Voice teachers who say they're voice teachers, right? And she said, they say you got to start them at 6 years old. They don't take 3-year-olds. You're the only one that takes 3-year-olds. Okay, and I arrogantly said, well, that's because they don't know how to teach. And they don't, because they don't have this fundamental understanding of 3-year-olds. And if you cannot communicate with a 3-year-old, something's wrong. Well, if you claim to be a teacher, there's something wrong, okay? All right, anyway, So support is the breath, whether you're doing yoga, whether you're doing singing, whether you're just relieving stress, whatever you're doing, okay? But you have to breathe deep. And that was the breathing I showed you earlier. Clavicular breathing. The clavicular breathing is what you do normally, okay? Because you're influenced at a very young age. You see everybody do that. You see it on TV, you see it in cartoons, you see it, all over the place. So you get conditioned into that belief, okay? But intercostal breathing is what you should focus on, okay? So take notes. So, so it improves oxygen exchange and breathing efficiency, okay? During long speaking periods, it works for speakers, okay? So I've taught public speaking for years, like over 20 years I've taught public speaking, okay? So I have different sectors of people that I teach for different things. So when people want to take public speaking from me, okay, that's the focus. Okay, I don't talk to them about spirituality. Why? Because they came to me for public speaking. Okay, so it's all about the individual. Okay, it's not a one size. This is not a one size fits all knowledge. This is not a one size fits all application. When people come to me, it's not a one size fits all thing. Okay, everyone has to be evaluated. Everyone has to be, you know, placed into some sort of category. Like, okay, goal. What's the goal? Okay, we're going to work on meditation, or we're going to work on, let's say, getting rid of anxiety and fear. Okay, because that's basically what we do. Okay, let's see. Let us holy lifestyle individually every day, every day obeying Christ's teachings. Yes. I hope you're paying attention to the esoteric knowledge, Peter, and not just following the stories. Okay, so it depends on what area of the voice we're talking about. I train voice actors. Okay, I just trained a very, very talented voice actor. Okay, so I do over 100 different voice types. Anybody can do it. Okay, I had this guy that came to me for singing, and then I started teaching him voiceovers because I told him that he was working in a place where he could produce people, right, that actually did voiceovers for commercials. And so I started training him for that. And then after he did that, I said, you could probably do voices. And I showed him how. Then he started doing that. Okay? And guess what happened to his anxiety? Guess what happened to his fear? It went out the door. Okay? So not only was he acquiring new skill sets that we went through 3 different skill sets. Okay? But his anxiety left, his fear left, all of that. Our worldly goal shall be to help one another and take care of the children. I wish that was everybody's goal. Good goal. Good goal, though. Yeah. I wish that was everybody's goal. Anyway, I was just talking to Jay about that this morning, so this is synchronicity for me. All right, but anyway, right? So the bottom line to all of this is the healing properties, okay? But I don't talk about this when I talk to medical people, okay? Because they need to be presented with a more scientific foundation. Somatic release through vocal expression. So what is somatic healing exactly? Okay, somatic, physical, physiology. Okay, so the interaction between physical expression and your emotional state is somatic. Okay, so when you talk about somatic healing, and you can look this up, because at the core of everything, that's what this is. Although it helps with other areas, okay, but this is what it is. Okay, the voice is one of the body's primary outlets for expression. This is why we say, find your voice, find yourself. Why do we say that? Okay, well, that's not Here For You Life Coaching. That's not our Here For You Life Coaching thing. Okay, that's the motto of our voice school. Because when you find your voice, okay, your voice is the inner expression of your soul. Okay, and when you find your voice, you find yourself. Why? Well, because through vocal expression, you get rid of all the negative emotions. When you get rid of all the negative emotions, what happens? Manifestation. Okay, you start attracting who you are. Why is that? Because you're free of all the negative emotions. You're only left with yourself. Okay? And this is why I say that when babies come into the world, there are no angry babies born. Babies are not born angry into the world. Okay? So, there you go. Okay? All of those things get added on to the baby as they grow. They go through experiences. Some are good, some are bad, some are traumatic, some are not, some are blissful. Okay? But the blissful ones and the traumatic ones are stored in your parasympathetic nervous system. And you're going to get triggers for each. Okay? If you're triggered into bliss, no problem, right? If you're triggered into trauma, what happens? Oh, it comes back. Okay. Okay, this part I don't go over with medical professionals. Okay. But the voice is one of the body's primary outlets for expression. And what happens when the expression happens? The vagus nerve gets stimulated. What happens when that happens? You start to feel settled and calm, okay, and peaceful inside. And then what happens? Problems go away. Okay? They're born with only one fear, and that's falling. Yeah, of course. Well, yeah. And they need to protect their heads. So my client Sarah, okay, yesterday we had a wonderful session. She's in the UK. She's probably here today. I didn't see her, but she's probably with us on our chat. But my client Sarah told me yesterday, she goes, I'm having a problem thinking negative about anything, because she's going through the vocalization process. Okay, she's also doing affirmation. So it's affirmations, meditation, vocalization, visualization. Okay, but she's well into the vocalization process, which removes all this negativity. Okay, it removes all of this. Now, people don't really understand until they go through it. That's the thing, right? And now that she's, I think, 6 weeks through it, is she I think she's 6 weeks in. No, I'm sorry. She's 10 weeks in. I think she's either 9 or 10 weeks in of the 12-week program. And now that she is, right, she goes, wow, I can't even think of negative thoughts. I used to always think of negative thoughts. And now I can't think of negative thoughts. And I said, yeah, that's how this works. Why? It's because of your vagus nerve. It's because of your parasympathetic nervous system. Okay? So vocalization can help release your accumulated muscular tension. That's the scientific way of saying it, okay? In the throat, in the chest, in the jaw, and diaphragm. And why is that? It's because the vagus nerve runs through your throat chakra for you spiritual people, okay? Throat chakra. I have a lot of spiritual people over here. On Facebook, I have a lot of religious people. So there's a lot of spiritual people around, okay? So I tend to get spiritual with things. And it goes through the throat chakra, into the heart chakra, and down into your gut, okay? And down to your sacral chakra. And what happens? Well, the vagus nerve affects all of these one by one. First, the throat chakra, and then it begins to open. What happens when the throat chakra opens? Well, with fear, the throat chakra will close. Okay, these are energy centers I'm talking about. Okay, I don't discuss these with professionals because they go like that. Okay. But with fear, okay, so what's the opposite of fear? Love. Okay, that's what babies are born into. Okay. So the throat chakra begins to close. And pretty soon they have no desire to voice their concerns. They have no desire to open up. They have no desire, okay, for that kind of confidence. And sometimes it affects all of their confidence, but they're unaware. They don't know. And they're walking around like this. They're walking around like this. And they need to be relaxed like this. And slowly, 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 they open like that. And that's what Sarah is going through. She's at the open stage. Okay, but it took her 9 weeks. So what happens what happens now? Okay, well that's for your voice, okay? So first the throat chakra opens, then the heart chakra opens. What happens when that happens? Well, sometimes you just burst into tears. Okay. Sometimes it's just an epiphany. Sometimes it's a feeling that just comes over you and you go, whoa, I didn't know I could feel like this. I didn't know this existed. No, because you've been conditioned by society, by these systems of things that surround us. Okay, I'm talking about television, news, all the things that, make you fearful, all the things that make you think you're something, that condition you into a perceived identity. Okay, all of those things. Good morning. Hey, John, good morning. All of those things. Okay, and pretty soon you start identifying with things. Okay, when a human being identifies with something, they become it. This is why when you're interested in something, you start to excel in it. Why is that? Animals can't do that. It's because you're so intelligent. Okay, now improved vocal strength. When your throat chakra begins to open, what happens? It reduces fatigue. You don't get tired as much. You have more energy. Okay? Because now you're an open circuit. Basically, you're an electromagnet. Okay? Now, medical professionals, right? They talk all day long. They use their voice all day long. Okay? And like I said about my nurse, she was in burnout and I had to rescue her from burnout. So we did 4 times a week. Okay? That's expensive. Okay? But guess what? Now we're down the road 4 years. She only comes once a week now. Okay? But during the critical stage, we pulled her out. She has never had that kind of stress again. Before, she had that kind of stress regularly, all the time. Okay, so yeah, affirmations, meditation, vocalization, visualization, narrator. Okay, yeah. So financially, okay, money is an energy. Okay, I'm just answering the chat because that's what I do. Okay, so money is an energy. Okay, you need to be on the same wavelength, or let's say the same frequency, or let's say the same emotion conducive to receiving as money. Okay, to receive it, you need to be a good receiver. Okay, as far as emotionally, we're discussing it now, so keep listening. Okay, affirmations, meditation, vocalization, visualization. Good morning, Marina. So when your voice is developed, guess what? It reduces fatigue, okay? Over long working hours. Like you can work longer. You can go into flow state. Okay, if you want to look up Dr. Stephen Kotler, he is an expert in flow state. Okay, and it's very interesting to understand what flow state is. And I'm not going to get into it because he can describe it better than I can. He can actually give you a different kind of science because he does it a different way. He also uses LSD and mushrooms and goes through all those things for flow state. I'm here to tell you you can do it through your voice. You don't need all that stuff. Okay, I've never done LSD and mushrooms and all that stuff. You don't need that. Okay, all you need is a developed voice. That's it. Okay. So communication advantages in clinical settings. Okay, this is for medical professionals. Okay, clearer vocal projection. Okay, it's automatic. You speak with more authority. A trained voice carries further without increased effort. In other words, you don't have to put so much energy. Okay, like when I'm addressing a crowd. Okay, I just drop my voice down and I just project it like this. That's all. And I start speaking like this. Am I using more energy? No. It's about frequency. But you have to develop the voice in order to have a strong bottom like this, okay? For your voice to carry. But I don't need to teach like that, so I teach in mid-range, okay? I don't have to be authoritative when I speak and when I teach, okay? So, but anyway, This is very useful for professionals. Why? Because no matter if they're an attorney, okay, so I have all kinds of professionals, okay? So it doesn't matter if they're an attorney. In fact, my attorney was, he does courtroom things. He's a business attorney, but he goes to court. So I trained him. He could write it off on his taxes. If you use this for professional means, or professional, if you're using this professionally, if you have to speak professionally, you can write this off on your taxes. Okay. But anyway, so for a courtroom situation, it was very useful for him. Okay. So he really liked that. Okay. Improved articulation. So articulation happens naturally when you develop the voice. Okay. It strengthens the coordination of your speech muscles. So we train people. Okay. So speech, singing, same muscles. We develop the muscles that people sing with. We develop the muscles that people speak with. It's more physiology than anything else. Why? There's only two things you use when you speak and when you sing: muscles and air. How much muscles, how much air? What I showed you earlier with the low voice, okay, that's more muscle. That's not more energy. It's switching. It's switching from less muscles to more muscles. And it's not more energy at all. It's the same. Okay? It's the same. All right. So anyway, so this improves clarity. Okay? How does it benefit you? It improves your clarity. Okay? When you're explaining things. Okay? So for a medical professional, right, they give diagnoses, treatment plans. They talk a lot to people. They explain medicine. They explain all kinds of stuff. Nurses explain procedures. They explain all kinds of things. They're talking all day long. And I get a lot of them. Right? And some of them write it off on their taxes. Okay. Vocal authority and perceived leadership. Okay, that's very important. A drill sergeant doesn't stand there and go, "Could you please do some push-ups?" Right? Okay. My son was a teacher as well. It just runs in the family. He was a drill sergeant. Okay. Drill sergeants yell at you. They use their voice. Okay. Did I train my son? No, I did not. I did not. Okay. Otherwise, his voice would have been really, really strong. But yeah. And you can also use your voice for defense purposes. Okay. Hey, Samantha. So let's say, for example, you're walking through, you're a female. Okay. The majority of my clients are female. Okay, because they're seeking confidence. Okay, they're seeking clarity. Okay, they're trying to get out of their overthinking because they're emotional beings. Okay, but if you're a female and you're walking through a parking lot and you have a developed voice, and all of a sudden, right, someone pops out from the shadows, okay, and you scream, it will scare them. Okay, some people have also, I used to tell my little kids when I taught them in the voice school, I used to tell them, don't use your voice as a weapon because it will really stun people. It will shock people. It can traumatize. Okay, it can do that. Okay, good morning, Lily. Good morning. Good morning, Empress. Good morning, guys. Okay. A stable and resonant voice. Okay, we're talking about the effects of your voice and how it works with manifestation, how it works, how it gets rid of anxiety. Your voice gets rid of all of this stuff. Okay, a stable and resonant voice signals confidence and competence to individuals. Okay, it improves trust. People start to trust you. Why? Because you're firm. You're not wishy-washy with your voice. Okay. People subconsciously interpret vocal tone as an indicator of authority, of calmness and certainty. A steady voice can increase patient comfort and willingness to follow instructions. Okay, that's for medical professionals, right? Reduce miscommunication. Okay, why is this important? You know why? Because the filter starts to go away. Okay, and you start to communicate things with clarity. Why is that? Well, because you get rid of the negative emotions. Okay? Doubt and fear goes out the window. Then you're not, you're not, you don't doubt yourself in the way that you communicate. Okay? But you start communicating calmly because you're coming from calm, because you're not coming from anxiety. So there's no anxiety left. If you're anxious, right? How many of your doctors are anxious? You can tell. You can tell how many of your doctors are stressed out. Just talk to them. Pay attention to how they're feeling. Pay attention to their energy. You can tell. But this is not just doctors, these are professionals in general. Okay? They're not focused on the inner energetic view or spiritual aspect of these things. It's all about how science relates to it. Okay? How does science interpret this? How does science look at this? Okay? But this is what the science is. Okay? When your vocal patterns are, when you're, let's say your voice is clear, let's say your patterns start falling in line. And what do I mean? Well, everyone has a pattern of speech. Okay? And when you start speaking in a regular, natural pattern, you're more trustworthy. Okay? Not only that, you're more clear in your communication. Why? Because you don't have to think about what to say. It will just come out automatically. And it will be coherent. Why is it coherent? Because you are clear. Okay? And this is important. When you're giving important instructions to people or information for people, it's important for me as a teacher. It's important for medical professionals in their business, in their line of work. Okay. So clarity and vocal steadiness are important to maintain attention, to hold attention. Okay. In my public speaking, regardless of the profession of people, okay, in my public speaking, I show people how to hold the attention of people. And this is why when I was doing entertainment, right, I did entertainment for my enjoyment, for my entertainment. I just let other people watch, but I love to make people laugh, okay? And it was an intellectual effort. A lot of people look at comedians and they go, oh, well, they're just being clowns. There's a methodology to it, okay? There's the timing. There's like how many times has your audience laughed in 45 minutes? When are they getting tired? Okay? And when do you have to wrap it up if they're getting tired? There's a science behind it, okay? It's very scientific. So all of these things just come into play naturally because you can sense things. You're a human being. You can sense things. But when you're being conditioned into this societal hypnosis, right, that happens. I can't tell medical professionals this, but they're aware. Some of them are aware. Okay? But being indoctrinated into the medical profession itself is a hypnosis. Okay? Because everything revolves around that. Okay? And like we discussed about money earlier, right? When you're indoctrinated into the financial system and you start to think that money is the thing, money becomes your God. And this is why in books like the Holy Bible, right, they say you cannot serve God and mammon. Why? Because you start to believe in the money. You start to put your faith in the money. You start to put your trust in the money. So as a medical professional, what do? You start to put your trust in the medical system. You start to put your faith in the medical industrial complex. You start to put your belief in the medical industrial complex. And you have been inducted into it. Let's say you're an attorney. You start to put your faith in the legal system. You start to serve the legal system. You start to trust the legal system. You start to, right? Because it's your thing. And then your peers are attorneys. And you end up worshiping the system whether you think so or not. Okay? Look up the definition of worship. All right. So, reduction of stored muscular tension. Okay? Improved breath rhythm. Okay? Your breathing, when you're relaxed, when you're in a more relaxed state, your breathing changes automatically. You breathe deeper automatically. You focus more automatically. Okay? Low frequency vocalizations, okay? We take people all the way from the lowest part of the scale, okay, to the highest that they can go. Low frequency vocalization through the human voice. Okay? So whether they're humming or, in our case, they're putting out a lot of tone with a lot of pressure. Okay? It stimulates vibration in the throat and chest. The throat chakra. The throat chakra for you guys over here. Okay? And what happens? Relaxation. What happens? You become who you are rather than what you identify as. Okay? That's a spiritual side. That's for my audience over here, for you guys. Okay? Because you start identifying with things, and then you become what you identify with. Okay? Now, if you are the martial artist, if you identify with that, and you start to excel in that, then you identify as the martial artist. Or you identify as the fireman, or you identify as the attorney, or the ambulance driver, whatever it is. Okay? So when you are a little child, what do they say? They say, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? You don't have to be anything when you grow up. Or you can be a culmination of things when you grow up. You can be unlimited things when you grow up. Okay? And you don't have to choose. Like, you don't have to choose just one thing. In the old days, you had to choose one thing. Okay? I chose multiple things before technology came along. And when technology came along, I was like, whoa, my prayers are answered. Right? And then now, okay, I have a doctor. I have a doctor that's a client, that's also an entrepreneur, that has a huge business. I mean, it's amazing, but it's all technology. Okay? He's not like the other doctors. Why? Because he sees. Okay? And when I say see, I'm talking about your third eye. He sees. Okay? From in here. That's also not scientific. Okay? But you have to close your distractors like this, and you have to sit in the kingdom. Jesus Christ said the kingdom is within. You have to sit in the kingdom for 10 to 15 minutes a day. If you have not done that, you do not know. Okay? And if you sit here thinking I'm crazy, okay, go ahead. See how that works for you. Okay? But I'm here to give you things to think about. I'm here to stimulate your thought process so that you start to understand that this religious stuff that you hear, this spiritual stuff that you hear, this information that you've been given about these things that are, let's say, the average person thinks of as woo-woo, okay, there's a lot of validity to it. Everything starts from in here. Henry Ford said, and he was very scientific, by the way, right? But he said, if you think you can or you think you can't, either way you're correct. What was he talking about? He was talking about your subconscious. When you listen to somebody like Tony Robbins talk about motivation, what is he really talking about? He's talking about your subconscious. When you go to church and the preacher says, God knows your heart, what is he talking about? He's talking about your subconscious. God is the superconscious, and he can only work with what is in your subconscious, because your subconscious contains your beliefs, the things you believe to be true in the world, and those are the only things that will pan out for you. If you don't believe something, or if you're not in alignment with something, it will not happen. Okay? Because you cannot embrace and welcome into your world what you do not believe to be true. Okay? You will have to put that into your subconscious first. How do you do that? Affirmations, meditation, vocalization, and visualization. It's so real. Yeah, Misha, it's real. I'm telling you the truth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So today, Misha, we're talking about the voice and how I present it to medical professionals, how I present the vocalization process. Okay, so the vocalization process also increases your heart rate. Uh, let's call it variability, or let's call it uh, so vagal activation through breathing and vocalization has increased your heart rate. Okay, so your heart rate increases. Okay, so your mood increases. So you have increases in all these areas. Okay, when your neurotransmitters are activated, for example, okay, in your brain, oxytocin and endorphins are secreted into your brain. Okay, so the oxytocin is the bonding hormone. The the feel good hormone is your endorphins. Okay, so both of those get released in your brain. And what happens when that happens? You get more relaxed. What happens when that happens? Your serotonin levels increase. Okay, go look these things up. Your serotonin levels increase. Your cortisol, okay, or the fight or flight hormone, cortisol, okay, the one that gets activated when you need to run or when you're fearing something, okay, it decreases. Adrenaline does not get activated. Why? Because the cortisol is not there. Because you don't need to run. Okay? If you're running, okay, like I told you, my attorney that I had last year, right? And she described her career as running in fear because she didn't want to be poor. Okay, now mindset changes everything. The way you think about things changes everything. But her mindset was, if I don't perform to the best of my ability, I am going to be poor. Was that a valid thought? No. Not if you believe that you're a spiritual being. Not if you believe that there is a higher power that exists. Not if you believe that source is real. Not if you believe that there is a God. Whatever you believe in that area, okay? Higher self, higher whatever, higher power, infinite intelligence, okay? If we can say that exists, then no, you don't need to operate out of fear. Yesterday we were talking about how fear-based motivation, right? Fear-based, you're being motivated by fear. Okay, so that's bullcrap. Okay, and I just come out and tell my clients that. Okay, now psychological and cognitive benefits, brain. Okay, cognitive. Okay, controlled breathing and vocal rhythm can improve focus and cognitive steadiness. What is cognitive steadiness? It means thinking positively, consistently. Okay, reduce performance anxiety. Okay, so we talked about it yesterday. High performance anxiety looks exactly like motivation. Thank you, Vani. High performance anxiety, high performance anxiety looks exactly like motivation. Okay, so when you're performing, right? If you're performing out of fear, okay, like yesterday we were talking about fear-based motivation. But if that's how you're doing this, if that's how you're living your career or living your life, because you don't want this to happen, you don't want that to happen, you don't want this, you're afraid of this, afraid of that, and that's why you're doing this, right? Wrong. That's not the way to do it. Because you will start to attract what you're afraid of. Okay, in the Bible, in the book of Job, right, it says, hang on one second, let me do this for confirmation purposes. There we go. So in the book of Job in the Bible, right, this is a lesson in that. Okay, Job says, what I fear befalls me. Okay, because what you fear will eventually befall you. Why? Because in your subconscious, that becomes the topic. It doesn't matter what you're fearing. It just matters that you're fearing. Okay, and that's what the subconscious recognizes, and then the subconscious looks for different things to fear. And it goes, okay, here's something else to fear. Here's something else to fear. Your reticular activating system in your brainstem goes, oh, you can fear this. Here, I'll filter in all the things that are we're fearing. Is that what we're doing? We're fearing. Okay, here's another thing to fear. There's one more thing to fear. One more thing over here. Look over there. There's another thing to fear. Okay, and now you've created that loop. Okay, that negative feedback loop that we talk about. Okay, go look these things up. I'm not, fact check me. Go ahead. Okay? That's why I'm here. I'm here for you to fact check me. I'm not here for you to believe me. I'm here for you to get some information and then go, oh, damn, I better check on this. Maybe that's me. Okay? So greater emotional stability happens when you develop your voice, when you work through your voice. Okay, this is happening with one of my clients right now. She's ex-military. Okay, and she did not have a hand on her emotions. What am I talking about? Like she falls to pieces? No. Like she overreacts. Why? Because in the military, they teach you to respond. She's a responder. I get a lot of that. I get a lot of PTSD victims, and they all calm. Okay? Does the PTSD go away? No, it doesn't go away, but it's very minimal. Okay? And now instead of a big tug like this, like a knee-jerk reaction, they just get a little alarmed. Okay? And then with a couple of deep breaths, they can move past it. So a lot of these people cannot walk through a shopping mall, let's say, without being alarmed because there may be an enemy. Okay? But with this training, with the vocalization process, okay, they walk to the mall. They get alarmed. Okay, take a couple of deep breaths. Okay, it's okay. All right, and then they proceed like that. Okay, so we're going to be talking about this week. I think until Monday. I think we're going to be discussing the vocalization process till Monday. And this is some of the ways that I discuss this for medical professionals. I treat a lot of them. Well, I work with a lot of them. Sorry, I can't say that. I'm just thinking medical. So, yeah. But yeah, so what we call these cycles, okay? So when you take 4 cycles, we call that a month. They're 1 hour, 1 hour a month. So people come to me 1 hour a month, and then we repeat the cycle, okay? And 4 cycles equals a month, but we do 12 cycles. In 12 cycles, everybody's different. Everybody's totally different. And like I said, it's very difficult to describe because the outcomes are different for everybody. Okay, and the reason why the outcomes are different for everybody is because everybody's different in here. Everybody has different goals. Everyone has different desires. Everyone has a different idea of what they want for their life. Okay, some people just want a log cabin in the middle of nowhere and they want to be left alone. Okay, and other people want to be loved and accepted, and they want to serve humanity. They want to get out there and touch people and work with people and do that. Okay, so everybody's different in here. So the results that people get are very different. Okay, but you can look at our results. We only get 5-star reviews. Go and look at Here For You Life Coaching. It's Here For You Life Coaching Honolulu. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Here For You Life Coaching Honolulu. Okay, and look at our reviews. We only have 5-star reviews, and it's because we work at this level. Okay, the kingdom is within. You don't know. You have no idea how powerful you are in here. Okay, you have the ability to have, do, or be anything you want to be. Okay, because you're a human being, because you have perception, because you have a subconscious, because you have a conscious mind as well. Okay, and because the superconscious is real. Okay, if you don't believe in God, then okay, then you just have a conscious and subconscious. Okay, and that in itself is magic. Okay, but manifestation is not magic. Manifestation is your subconscious. Okay, so we're gonna let our stream go.